And we're live. It's Patrick McDonald, and today on the podcast, we're talking with Bill Hauser. Feel me? How you doing, man?
I'm chilling. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. It's a lovely day in April, and we should be outside enjoying the weather or something. But we're here podcasting, so I appreciate you coming out.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude. So I wanted to have you on the podcast because you do something that I really like and enjoy, which is play music, and you do it on the saxophone.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I grew up playing saxophone.
Okay.
15 years, played in the military for a while.
Oh,
and
wow.
then after that, I was like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see that. I feel that way sometimes too. I'm like, am I really going to keep doing this? But,
But you keep doing it. And
yeah.
And as far as I know, you're like the only guy in Anchorage that does the saxophone full time and is, making a living out of it.
I'm not sure. I mean, I would have to ask around about that, but you could be right. Not sure.
As far as I can tell,
Right.
Or at least you're the best at putting your stuff out there and letting other people know that you're available to do a bunch of gigs. Because I see you on social media all the time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I spend more time social media-ing than I do practicing or playing, it seems like.
But you've been practicing and playing for decades now, right?
Yeah, it's been kind of on and off. The journey has been kind of long and winding. I think it's a tough decision to make that you're going to, I think I'm going to be a musician. Because once you make that decision, then what happens is you have to accept all that comes along with it. And there's a lot to accept that's not easy.
For instance?
Well, your income, obviously, first and foremost, employability. The lifestyle obviously is not easy. Relationships are not always easy to hold down. You want to find somebody that's going to be cool with what you do. If you're traveling, your hours are crazy. You got to practice all the time. Your income is a roller coaster if you're a freelancer. There's a lot that goes along with it. And then, especially here in Anchorage, most of the gigs I get hired to do, it's kind of like, I'm kind of like background. I really enjoy the larger stages. So sometimes you don't really enjoy your gigs, and then you'll go through the whole thing of like, why am I doing this?
Gotcha. So how long have you been doing it in Anchorage?
Well, I moved back. This is my hometown. I moved back about 4 years ago. And when I came back, I was started by playing on the streets.
You were doing some busking.
I was busking, right. And I was living in New York City prior to this, where I was for 13 years. And so, of course, to have that as your world for so long, it definitely becomes ingrained in you. And I came back here for a myriad of different reasons. And I was like, well, let's just, I knew Anchorage. I know what it's about. So I was like, let's just see what I can make out of nothing. And so it started by me making phone calls to local musicians and asking, hey, you guys need a sax player? And, but of course what I play is an auxiliary instrument. There's just nothing in the budget. Most of these guys aren't getting paid enough anyway. A lot of horn players, string players, et cetera, they're all starving. This bass player, a local guy, had recommended, well, I heard, so-and-so is a guy, he plays downtown. I heard he's making, X amount on the streets. I'm like, really? So then, of course, the New York in me was like, well, then that's what I'm going to do, too. I'm not going to ask permission. I'm just going to do it. And that's what I did. In fact, I copped his whole setup. Shout out to Nelson Felix, who lives in Fairbanks now. He's kind of split his time between here and Anchorage, was very generous in sharing information with me and very generous in sharing the stage with me. We sometimes would play together on the street or sometimes, even across the street on occasion. But he had done it, from what I understand, for something like, 11 years or something like that. And I thought, this guy's a true hustler, And so there was never any sort of hostility or animosity. He was always very gracious towards me. And for that, I'm eternally grateful.
Yeah, we live in such a small town, or a big small town. Just those relationships are paramount. And big shout out to him and you for, probably improving on what he was doing and taking it or moving it along to the next phase.
I don't know. I don't know if I improved it or not. I really look at what I do as like anybody, any other saxophonist could come up here from anywhere. There's no filter. Anybody can come up and do this. And so it's really supply and demand. If there was like 50 guys or girls, whoever came up here to do this, I would just be one of them, and then people would be used to it. So I think it really boils down to, do you see it or not?
But for the moment, there aren't. I applaud your reasoning, and bringing more of a market up here for buskers, for musicians to play on the street or to play in gigs and make a living out of it is something that I would love to see. I would love to see that culture emerge. Mm. I think you're kind of the guinea pig in this in the landscape right now, in terms of like proving that it's a way to create art and create music and do it regularly and gain a following and do it here in this atmosphere in this city.
Yeah.
For our residents.
I mean, I hope so. I haven't busked now, though. I've stopped busking. It's been about 2 years. And I only did it for like maybe a year and a half or so until I kind of got on my feet. And I thought the money is actually, pretty good. But from a marketing standpoint, I realized that if I wanted to take the next step, that I was going to have to stop playing on the streets. Even though I love to hustle, I love, making money. I love being outside, especially as it gets warmer. But, then there's that whole perception, that people can get you for whatever. Because I saw you playing for free out here. Scarcity is definitely, raises your prices. And I've got enough money saved up now at the moment that it's like, if I don't need to go out and do it, I'm not gonna. And which also plays into when you're trying to be a freelance musician doing this and people don't know what the market is on this. They go, well, how much do you charge? And I get that question all the time. And, you try to be fair and you try to make it worth your while at the same time. But I'm definitely not getting rich off of this. I'll put it that way.
Well, where can people find you now if you're not on the street anymore?
I'm at Sullivan's every Wednesday from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And then after that, if you go to my website, KillBill Sax, like the movie, .com/shows, or if you go on Facebook, KillBill Sax, one word, I always have my shows listed where I'm going to be. So sometimes I'm playing at different bars or restaurant, private events increasingly, corporate events increasingly. Weddings not quite as much as I would like yet, but I assume that over time that might start to pick up a little bit.
Yeah, so to all the wedding folks out there, if you're listening, Bill is looking for those gigs. KillBill Sax on Instagram as well, by the way.
Yeah, yep.
So I'm glad that you mentioned Sullivan's because that's where I first learned about you.
Okay.
I had seen you on Instagram, just perusing through hashtag Anchorage or hashtag I love Anchorage or something to that effect, and I saw that you were playing at Sullivan's and happened to be there just with a couple other friends having some drinks, and you were there. I was like, "Whoa, this guy's real," and that was like almost right when I got here over a year or so ago.
Okay.
And I kind of played it just like some dude just appreciating another dude playing saxophone because it touched on my childhood, and I was just like, drop a tip and then see what happens next. And so kind of since then I've been regularly following you and watching what you do. I really appreciate how open and honest you are on Instagram. You do a lot of talking head stuff.
Right.
You talk to the camera a lot, and you talk to people about where you are in your life or what you're thinking through, or just some behind the scenes in terms of taking apart your saxophone and what that's like.
Right.
Or at gigs, giving the inside perspective on things that we may not normally get to see because you're in that position.
I think it's very important, anybody that knows anything in today's landscape, that if you're going to be a purveyor of anything, no matter what, if you're selling, roof tiles or whatever, you want to have any kind of social media presence that you can. And, it's like I was in the back of a taxi cab back in Brooklyn with this keyboardist. These rhythm section people always, are making money because there's always a demand for a bass player or a drummer or a keyboardist, but not for horns. And he had said to me, well, you got to make them want that. You got to make them want that shit. So I was like, all right. I come to Anchorage and started playing R&B, soul music or whatever, and it's like Anchorage is not the kind of place that normally has that. So we got like blues, we got rock, country, bluegrass, all that stuff. And I'm like, this town, if anything it could use is something on the more smooth and soulful side. And that's just a supply and demand thing. And it happens to work out in my favor. There was a point to this. I went down the rabbit hole, and I can't remember what it is now. What was the question again?
Just meeting at Sullivan's, we were talking about social media.
Right, that's what it was. So, sorry about that. I was like, lost my train of thought. So yeah, people want to feel invested in who you are. I mean, you don't want to be annoying about it. It's not a vanity thing. But if you look at yourself as you're supplying a service, and if you even go a step further and look at yourself as a product, you want people to be invested in that product. And a lot of times we've seen that evidenced in reality TV. Like, I don't watch TV, period. But like, a lot of people love reality TV. And I guess that, you're doing your thing with IGTV, social media. People seem to want to get to know you so they can feel something. Why should I care about this person? So I think it's very important to try and be as real and open as possible without oversharing or making it too much about, a vanity thing.
The perfect life. Or
it's not,
it's the highlights, right? That's what a lot of, if you were to marginalize social media and maybe distill it down to what a lot of accounts are, they're like me taking selfies or beautiful pictures of me on vacation or on the high life. But I like what you're talking about, which is this authenticity that we've come to grow and expect from the people who we want to invest in, and whether it's your brand or your identity or whatever you're saying about the world, your commentary on the world, in whatever form you do it, in music or art or.
I think people, it's like an author, when you're writing a book, or you're a comedian, or whatever it is a form of media communication. You want to get people over on your side. Like, I'm having this interview with you right now. What I should be doing is like smiling more and like, but because this is long form, I'm just kind of like whatever. But if I'm doing these little short hits, the video things on the Instagram stories is like 60 seconds. You want to. The beautiful thing about that is, like, if you don't like your take, you can just reshoot it. Make sure you smile. I took some on-camera classes back in New York, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you're not smiling enough." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to smile." They're like, and you go back and watch the footage, and you go, "Oh yeah, I should have been smiling."
Well, yeah, that's why I like doing this podcast in a long form, because I think that you get to something deeper than just 60 minutes or a 60-second segment. You get to see all of the nuances, and the things that happen when you're not like coming up with some plan on how you want to do it, or they're not, what do you call it, scripted.
Right.
This is very unscripted. I want it to just be like a conversation, kind of like we're on the telephone talking to each other, but we're staring at each other and like having to look at each other and wait and like listen to what we're saying and kind of, go through what it's like to talk to another human face to face.
I think it's great that you got video of this, because sometimes if you're, I used to do voiceover auditions in New York, and they're like, "Oh, put some more smile on it," and so you're like, "How do I do that?" And it's like, "Oh, actually, if you smile during the audition, you might actually put some quote unquote smile on it on the read." So sometimes, like, I might be smiling and my voice is not. So we're doing the podcast right now. I'm like, okay, to try not to come across too, if all they got is audio.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, how do I sound friendlier than I sound right now at this moment?
I remember I was a telemarketer back as one of my first jobs, and they told us the same kind of thing, is because they can't see you, so you have to, you have to express it with your face and create this elocution that people can't see, but they can feel, right?
Yeah.
So I like getting meta about the podcast. I think it's interesting to talk through some of this stuff, just because we can, and it's a different format than, say, Instagram or Twitter or whatever.
It's really interesting you brought that up. One of my first jobs after college too, I was working in the fundraising department at my university. I went to Indiana University, and so I stuck around after graduating because I was in a band, and everybody was like, a little bit younger than me by a year or two, whatever. I was like, oh, the band is killing. I'm having a good time. So the job was call alumni, right, at dinner time, of course, as we all hate those calls. And you're like, okay, so what am I supposed to do? Okay, call them and reminisce with them, bring them back down memory lane, and make them feel about what a good time college was and how important it was, and share a little bit of yourself and what it is that you're doing, so they feel like maybe they want to give a little back. And, like, I'm a musician. I got my degree, but, like, I'm not, I don't have money to give to the university or whatever. So if anybody, I was thinking to myself, they call me, like, at 6:30 in the evening or whatever time, I'll be like, they're like, oh, what are you doing with your degree? I'm like, well, I was playing on the streets for a couple of years, and then, I play in restaurants, and, well, how much did you guys want? I got nothing for you.
I get those calls all the time, too, and they're like, but it's about the cause. And I'm going, well, I still owe you a lot of money.
Oh, snap.
Yeah. So
yeah,
it's not about the cause. It's about the money. Like, just be real. Come on.
Yeah.
If it was just about the cause, then I wouldn't have to give you any money. So.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't go down the whole discourse on, like, public versus, subsidized funding or where the money funnels from with public and school, state universities. But it's a racket.
I think it, I'm speechless on that. I agree and disagree. I think how much I own a mortgage and student loans. So from that perspective, I'm like, I can't manage that. I'm going to be paying it for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
From getting in the door to a lot of places.
Yeah.
And my background's in urban planning and city planning. Like, you can't get a job at the city if you don't have a master's degree.
Right.
That's just the bottom line. I mean, you can, but it's a lot harder.
Yeah.
So having the school name and having that pedigree has opened a lot of doors, but then it's not paying my bills. At least it's starting to now.
Yeah.
But I graduated in 2011. It's 2019, and I just started making real money 3 years ago. So
nice. Makes a huge difference.
It does. So I agree. It is a racket. Like, there's so much now it's a racket because of the internet, because now you can learn a bunch of things online that you didn't have to go pay for, pay these just giant amounts of money that you didn't have. And you made these decisions because you were too young to realize, like, how big of a deal it was.
Yeah.
Like, this huge crushing debt is a real problem. And we'll see how it plays out, but I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be paying for it until I'm 50.
It's interesting. I've thought much about this too. Is that the idea of after high school, you're depending on who your parents are, depending on where you come from, everybody's experience is a little bit different. But at least for me, it was like my parents were like, "Well, you should really go to college," and I'm like, "Yeah, I want to get out of here. I want to get out of state. I grew up here in Anchorage. I want to see what it was like." So when I was 18, I left and went to college in Oregon, and then I transferred out of Oregon after a year to go to IU, where I stayed. And looking back on it now, everybody's a little bit different, but if I could do it all over again, ... I would have waited because, I'm really slow. I'm just slow. I'm like, my 40s now, and I'm like still just, I don't know what side is up half the time, like all these things as you get older that you learn about that you wish you would have been taught. And I see time escaping faster and faster. We all think about those sorts of things. So it's like, well, I don't know. When's the right time to go to college? Or do you want to get the partying out of your system? Do you want to go see the world? Do you want to stay in your hometown? I mean, there's no right answer.
I think slow is relative, right? You have to figure out what you want to do, and it takes time to do that. But the way I see it, you are self-employed. You have your own thing, and you're hustling on it.
I am hustling.
So you're getting to do what you want to do. And eventually, I mean, I keep coming back to that realization over and over and over in my life is do what you like to do, find time to do it, and hopefully you can get paid to do it.
Yeah.
And I've gone through a series of jobs over and over and over, just jumping around to different cities. I've lived in over 8 states.
Wow.
And it takes a long time to get established and then to build up the networks and build up the friendships. And that to me has been the hardest part, the relationships and the context of any city that I've been in. So finally, when you get to that point and you're able to stabilize, then you can start to fulfill that ideology of following your passion and following your dreams. And so I applaud anybody who's doing that kind of thing, whether it's a small business owner, whether it's a musician, whether it's an artist. And so that's what I see in you, and I see you pushing this narrative forward in Anchorage. So that's why I wanted to have you on. That's why I wanted you to talk about it, because I think it's important that we have people like you who are are leading the charge and who are pioneering this kind of activity in our city.
I appreciate that. I don't want it. I don't want to come across as like, doing any favors for anybody other than myself. Like, I remember back, I got like a newspaper back when Anchorage Daily News was called Alaska Dispatch News. I was actually out on a cruise ship gig, and I got a Facebook message request, and I just didn't pay attention to it. I'd forgotten until like I was off the tour. I was back in Anchorage. 2 months had gone by, and I look at it, and it was somebody had wanted to do a piece on me, asking, "Hey, well, you're the guy on the streets playing. I want to do a piece on you." And I remember thinking to myself, I'm really glad I had not answered that, because I didn't want to tell people, what the money was like. Not that it's a ton of money, but still, like, that's, people are going to ask, well, how much do you make? They always ask that question. And it's like, no, you got to do it for yourself. I'm not putting that out there.
Yeah. Money is one of those things that you can either offer it up or you can't. And I respect either way. Like, I didn't make real money until I was 34, 35. Yeah. Until I was 35, the most I'd ever made was $19,000 a year.
Yeah.
So now I make pretty good money,
yeah.
and that's on me if I want to share it,
Yeah, right. But that's the point, is that I think in the question of why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this? Who are you? I'm like, I'm just a guy who saw an opportunity to do something that was missing up here. If you go to all these other larger markets, and there's already cats out there doing it, so it's not so special. But here, it was missing, and I just plugged myself in, and I was just trying to make a living doing it. And that's it. It's just that pure and simple.
There's a lot of markets here that are missing. There's a lot of gaps in the markets that I think are missing.
Anchorage is a very interesting place. Having grown up here, it's always been this place. It's always had a ton of potential.
Yeah, and it's also a young city.
Yeah.
And coming from an urban planning background, I realize just the size and the scale of Anchorage. It's about 300,000 people.
Right.
I bring this up all the time, but when you're at that size, you can only do so many things. It's only like you've gotten to level 1 or level 2.
Right.
And that only unlocks a certain amount of things.
Mm-hmm.
Until you grow and you expand and you have a density that is double the size, like 600,000, then that's when you start to get more amenities.
Right.
Like better public transportation, better urban living, better, amenities downtown, all the sightseeing.
Right.
But we're not there yet. So I've learned to respect the size of our city,
mm-hmm.
and this, for lack of better terms, like fishbowl that we live in.
It is a total fishbowl.
And eventually we'll grow to a bigger size. But for the meantime, we're at this stage where we're still very much in development. We're still very young in our history as a city.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of opportunity. Like you said, there's a lot of things that we can move forward on. And I think, and just in any other city that I've been in, it's been a lot harder to get in my foot in the door. But here it's been easier. Yeah.
Anchorage has been crazy easy for me. I've been very blessed. And sometimes it's hard to come back to your hometown. I think we had talked about this, and I was like, oh man, back in my hometown. And I was like, that whole thing. We
talked about it when, probably at the end of the summer last year.
Yeah.
You were getting a sandwich at Pill's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes, friends or whoever, anybody who knows me is like, oh, yeah, Bill talks a lot of trash about Anchorage or whatever. But it's like, at the same time, I always try to present a full balanced picture that there has been nowhere else I've lived that has given me as much as Anchorage has given me. It is very much what you make it. And sometimes it's not easy to make it what you want to make it. But if you're, industrious enough and you make the right relationships, eventually you can make it what you want to make it. But it's not going to be handed to you.
That should be our motto right there. You can make it what you want to make it, but it's not going to be handed to you. Anchorage.
I remember saw this article on it was the Anchorage Daily News, and they were talking about Mountain View being the most racially, ethnically diverse neighborhood in America per capita. And they were interviewing somebody, I think they were like a refugee from like some African country, and they had said something, they were escaping from whatever, war torn, I'm not even sure. And excuse my ignorance, because it was so long ago I read this, but the quote was, "I'd rather be cold than dead." And a friend of mine hit me on Facebook, was like, that should be Anchorage's motto. That's kind of morbid.
In terms of a refugee situation where we're inviting in people who are in countries that are not as, not as affluent as ours.
Right.
Yes, in that kind of context, for sure. But in terms of, just being an American or being a resident of Alaska, to me, I see this place as very much a blank slate for a lot of people to come in and try to build something.
Absolutely. This is what this place has always been. It's kind of like a last chance. We got a lot of outlaws up here, a lot of people running from whatever, and a lot of people that deserve another chance. It depends on who it is, but it's definitely a mixed bag of nuts. And I think I'm another one of those people that was like trying to, New York had no love for me. It doesn't. It's just what it is. It's not personal. It's just the way. It's. I had no plan when I was living there. And every year just became, just trying to make it every month. I never really gained any traction. And to talk about why I started playing the saxophone again, you have to understand. Like I took about 10 years off. Because I went on tour when I was about 24, 25, and it was some Chitlin circuit type of thing. You know what I mean? It was not glamorous. All the guys in the band were like, late 30s, early 40s. They all seemed kind of bitter to me at that time. And I was, in my early 20s, and I was like, man, I want to turn out like these guys, And kind of the way it had happened too, like they kind of were at me. And it wasn't for anything I had done. It was just they were insecure, looking back on it. But at the time, I'm like, man, what's these guys' problems? Why are they on me, And it was a grind, the tour was tough. And so I put the horn down. I moved to New York, and I thought, well, I'm in New York. I'm just going to do something because everything is here. But what ends up happening if you go there without a plan is you end up on the hamster wheel. Whatever means you can make, that's going to be your life because it's really hard to break out of that. And you can meet all kinds of people. You can always network out there. You're always rubbing elbows with people. But getting in is a different story. People already got their established positions. They're not trying to let another fucking person in. Yeah. And so for me, coming back to Anchorage after having learned all of that, and I started playing the saxophone at about year 10 of living in New York City, I was like, man, I'm just miserable here. So I started going not to make money, but just have an outlet. And then I had so much fun out there with that I just kept doing it. But at the same time, I felt like coming home. Just because not coming home. I really wanted to leave New York because I just was like, I was just over it. It was too much. I was getting older. And Anchorage was like the next logical step because it's my hometown. And I was, I had my reasons. And so I kind of came back and landed here. And now I've been anchored down, as they call it, Anchorage, for a reason.
It's really interesting to hear your story about going out to New York and cutting your teeth there. And what a place to go cut your teeth. 8 million people. It's the biggest city in all of America, and like you said, it's just there's tons of people there. So how do you differentiate yourself from just the ebb and flow of everybody coming through all the time?
Well, I mean, everybody's going to give you a different answer on what worked for them and their take and that sort of thing, But generally speaking, I think that while talent will take you very far. If you're not at the top of the pile, and I definitely am not, nor was I, then it's just hustle. It's just keep showing up. And eventually other people are going to drop off like flies because it's not an easy place to live. You just keep coming. You just keep showing up. You grind. And when I got to Anchorage, I very much had that mentality. I knew that the playing field was going to be way easier, but at the same time, I didn't let up. It was like, I don't care if I'm the best or the not, but no one's going to out-hustle me. And that's the bottom line. So in New York, that's kind of what it is. Just, there's people out there making money, performing, doing whatever, and you listen to them and you go, they're not really that great. But maybe they got the look, or maybe they got their marketing, or maybe they hustle hard. And it's like, and you realize that, you have to make something happen. And instead of, I think for me, a lot of musicians, what was hard for me to swallow for a while was that the idea was to try to impress other musicians so they'll give you a call. It was a very passive, backdoor sort of way of getting, quote unquote, put on. Put me on. I was never good enough as a saxophonist for anybody to put me on or want to put me on. And there was never enough spaces. Like, oh yeah, we need a sax player. Nobody says that. Those days are over. So what I had to do was what I had to do, playing on the streets, playing all the lead vocal parts on these classic R&B songs, and it just seemed to work. So then I was like, okay, now we got something. We got a product. So now how do we market this thing? And as we talked about earlier with the backseat taxi cab conversation, I'm trying to make people want it. And you got to think about, who are you targeting? What are their needs? What kind of music are we playing here? Who's going to want this? And you try to think in terms of, what is it going to take for people to see the value in what I do? And you accordingly, kind of tailor that for them.
So I was going to ask you about that, how you've managed to come to your sound, because you were mentioning that a little bit earlier, like all these different styles, and now you found this kind of smooth R&B, which is the niche you're kind of in right now. Is that what you want to do?
Well, to be honest with you, like I love soul music, R&B, and I know it's changed a lot. Like what they call R&B today is not, it's not like it was, 20 years ago, and then even before that, 40 years ago. And so I think for me, as a jazz musician, I just kind of had a difficult time accepting that I was supposed to play all these old standards, from the 50s, whatever, or 40s. And musically, those songs are superior than what we have today, because back then they didn't have the technology that we have today. Now everything's based on, trap beats or whatever kind of cool sounds you can produce. And what's happened is melodies and harmonies have become much more simplified. You can hear that in a lot of Drake songs, especially. He just kind of, he's brilliant marketing, got brilliant production, but melodically, there's not a whole lot going on there. But that's okay. It sells. And the thing with music is it's always changing. And that's the other part of it. You can't say, well, this era is better, or I need to stay true to this era. Or a lot of people lament that it's changing and like, oh, I don't like. No, that's the job. It changes, or else you got to find a niche and master it as best you can. I've always loved R&B, soul music, classic soul, and I decided to just kind of take my jazz background and just kind of apply it. So basically, I was like, why not just do jazzy versions? It's not jazz in my mind, but a lot of people will call it that.
And back to the question, is that what you want to do? Or are you at a point where you want to try something else?
Well, I think the style of music for me suits me quite well. I never really get tired of playing soul and R&B. It's easy. It's fun. I know how to do it. People appreciate it. I often tell people that, the music sells itself. All I have to do is play it. I didn't write these songs. These are all covers. My job is just to do it justice as best I can. But I will say that the playing over tracks is great from the standpoint of financially, logistically. Everything about playing over tracks is superior to playing with other musicians, except for the actual music itself, except for the musical experience. So that brings you to the next thing. Well, how do I get in a situation where I'm part of like a bigger budget thing? How do I get on a national tour or whatever? And then that becomes like, hey, man, can you put me on? So instead of trying to impress other musicians, and I think most of my followers are not musicians, because I don't think I impress that many musicians, quite frankly.
I'm here. You impressed me.
The guys and girls that I look up to, they don't really follow me back on social media.
So who are some of your influences?
On the saxophone, or in terms of like?
Yeah, sure. On the saxophone, and then
everybody.
Well,
I mean, I could go on and on, because I started playing jazz at an early age, I guess, junior high really. And around high school, I started getting, I went to like master classes, and these jazz guys, they would fly out from New York up at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, back when the state had money, and they fly somebody out. And it was like, they give us a syllabus, and like, check out these albums. And I had no way of knowing that, because my parents, they weren't really into that. So I started, go to like Borders Books of Music. I'm giving my age. This is before Napster. This is before streaming.
I know what Borders is.
Right. And I would go and I would, buy a CD. Go and buy a, Joe Henderson or Stanley Turrentine or Johnny Griffin or Sonny Rollins, Bird, Cannonball, Sonny Stitt. It's like, I don't really want to offend anybody by leaving out like this long list of influential saxophonists.
Dexter Gordon, John Coltrane, Bob Mintz.
Sure.
Bob Mintzer,
Bob Mintzer, right.
Bob Mintzer.
Brecker. But you know,
Parker, of course.
Yeah, you know, I mean, and then there's the smooth jazz guys too. And I'm not really a huge smooth jazz fan per se, but you know, there's
like Kenny G.
I don't like Kenny G.
Neither do I.
A lot of people like Kenny G, and to each their own. You know, what I realize is that there's a market out there for things. I was like, I guess there's a market for that. I didn't know. But then there's guys like Kirk Whalum. He plays with a lot of soul. Gerald Albright, who I got to open up for 2 years ago, which was amazing. You know, he's kind of straddles that line. He's funky, but he's got jazz chops too. So, but I mean, those are all saxophonists. You listen to them, kind of hear what they do stylistically, but it's not so much about. You want to listen to the people that play your instrument, but you really want to listen to the overall language. So you can lift anything from guitarists, singers, pianists, drummers. And incorporate it. And what I do is basically I'm just instrumentalizing vocal parts, you know. So then it's like, well, how do you sound like a singer? And why does that work over trying to show off your chops? A lot of saxophonists are like, check out my chops. But then you realize that marketing-wise, that the general public doesn't really, you got to have some chops. But if you're going to be all about chops, then you've gone too far.
Right. At some point, yeah, people don't understand what you're trying to do, even though
they don't care.
Right.
They don't care. What people want to hear is songs they already know. They want to hear stuff that's easy to sing. You know, they want to hear stuff that kind of makes them feel a certain way. And so that brings me to my next point. Like musically, for me, what I determine to be the best is how it makes me feel. You know, there's other people that will say, well, you got to look at music's a lot of numbers, you know, math and relationships and chord movement and that sort of thing. And that's all great. But for me, it's always been, how does this hit me? And so for me, Donny Hathaway, the singer, is the benchmark on, you know, if you've ever heard any of his music, you'll know that after hearing anything else, that nothing compares in terms of the way it makes you feel emotionally. And so if I can even get a fraction of his feel and emotion into my music, then I'm already ahead of the game.
Wow. That's good. I'm glad you expressed that. Just thinking through all the times that I've seen you, whether it be in Sullivan's or seen you at the State Fair or at the Spinard Prom, and you're trying to convey that in all of your performances, is trying to evoke some kind of emotion from the audience.
That's what it's about, man. People respond to the human voice. If you listen to some of Kanye West's older stuff, like I was reading an article somewhere that those sounds that you would hear in some of the songs, they were actually human voices or choruses or anything, and he would, you know, change it up a little bit, but you still were hearing something that was a human voice. And I think that it connects with people viscerally to hear the human voice. And so that's the key, is to try and sound as much like a singer as possible when you play, if you're looking to connect with the audience from that standpoint. If you're looking to get put on in a big band, or you're looking for someone to hire you for your chops, then it's a different thing. You know, you're trying to sound, you know, show everybody your technical abilities, or maybe you want to show them how well you can write and arrange sheet music and how quickly you can get it done.
Yeah, I'm good you're explaining, like, the breaking down for us, like what it is that when you're going out and you're performing, like how you're thinking through it and what you're doing. Because when I go in, you know, and there's a musician or music being played, and I just want to enjoy myself, I want to have a good time. At the same time, you know, it's background music, and sometimes it's music to be ignored by. We've all been there, and
right.
But at the same time, you're still trying to create an atmosphere and environment that is emulating one of our main senses, which is audio, which is a way to express information between people. So you're trying to sing to them through your saxophone, and you're trying to convey that understanding and that meaning to them.
Well, for me, the goal is really to make as much money as I possibly can to support myself.
Way to bring it back to the practicality, Bill.
But that's the thing, is that if you want to be a working musician, then they teach you, okay, well, you're supposed to know these songs, you're supposed to know the parts of these songs, you know, you're supposed to play the flute, you're supposed to play the iwi, you're supposed to sing, you're supposed to play percussion, all of that, and you got to put a smile on your face all the time and be dependable and be likable, you know, and listen to others. There's a lot that goes into it. And so it's either that, or, you know, you can be a weekend warrior. You can have a regular job and you can do it on the weekends. And I I don't see anything wrong with either. It really depends on the kind of person you are and what your goals are. A lot of people do music because it just makes them feel good. They get it out of their system. They need it on the weekends, or they need it on their free time. It brings them therapy, and I think that when you take something you love and you monetize it, that changes things quite a bit.
Right, because to do it on the weekend or do it as your passion, it's an outlet. You're being creative, and you have a format to be creative in, whether it's art or music. Can you talk a little bit then about like what it's like to take something that you enjoy doing and starting to think about it from a business perspective? Because I played saxophone for 15 years, and then at the end, so after my military stint, after it, I was like, I'm done. It's no longer fun for me anymore. I'm playing all these marches, playing all this patriotic music. Like, I know John Philip Sousa up and down. I don't even, it's just, it wasn't there for me anymore. So how do you make that transition?
Well, I think the most important thing that you can do is have an understanding of what your goal is. If you're just in it for the money, that's the wrong reason. And rest in peace to Roy Hargrove, the trumpet player. He was also a big influence on all of us horn players. He was the guy that bridged jazz and hip hop and R&B. And so it was a huge loss. But he had said in an interview, like, you do this for the love. You don't do it for the money. And I talked to another musician in New York and said, make it about the music all the time, and the money will come. I'm kind of the opinion that, I think that if you can steer yourself towards a goal in terms of what kind of gigs do you want to do? What do those gigs entail? Right now I'm doing a watered down version of what I'd like to be doing because I'm playing over tracks and I'm getting hired at restaurants and bars. And that's not unique to Anchorage. That's a lot of places where musicians are just, they're kind of selling their souls just to get a buck, make, $100 bucks, $150 that night. Or they're playing weddings where they get paid a little bit more and they're playing all the hits that the wedding guests want to make. So you have to think about what are the avenues that are available to you, and which one suits you the best. I had asked a friend of mine, how do you know that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing for a living? And it's like everybody wants to say, oh, I love what I do. But I think a more realistic take on it would be, do you mind what you do? Do you mind doing this day in and day out? Because we've all had jobs that we've hated. We've all had jobs where we can't wait for the weekend, where we drink or do whatever just to get through it, and then Monday rolls around and we're just like, I look at what I do kind of like as, I have prior work experience doing things that had nothing to do with music at all, so it helps for me to have that perspective. But at the same time, I look at the gigs I do here, and maybe once a month I might get one gig where I'm like, yeah, I'm really into this, even though it's tracks. When you could feed off a larger audience, when you're playing for the right crowd, and you've got that, and there's an excitement to it, versus, hey, can you turn it down? We had some complaint from the guests. No musician's really excited about doing one of those gigs. So I think once you can materialize, have an idea of what it's going to take to get the kinds of gigs that you want, and start practicing for those types of gigs, then you're going to have a better chance at enjoying what it is that you do.
So the transition is trying to figure out what you like to do, what you mind doing, and then sort of figuring out where that market is.
I think so.
And we all have jobs that we hate. I've had decades and decades of jobs that I've had to go through and that are just mundane, and you have to roll out of bed, like you said, and work 9 to 5 and just figure out that one thing that'll get you through. And there's exciting times and there's low times. It's just like the ebb and flow of the 9 to 5. And so I'm always really interested in entrepreneurs or solopreneurs who are out there trying to make a buck, or just trying to make a living out of what their craft is, or what their discipline is. And
it's interesting. People want to hear me say, "Oh, I love it. It's great." People really like the idea because they go to their jobs, they come back after work, and then they'll see me play, and it's this, "Oh man, this is different." It hits them a different way because they've been stuck in a cubicle, or they've been dealing with some customers they didn't want to deal with, whatever it was. They think, "Man, I wonder what it's like for that guy." They kind of it sure looks like he loves what he does. And it's like, yeah, I think what I love most about what I do is that I get to be my own boss. That's number one for me. The music is kind of what you make it. The biggest rut I face right now is that I just don't have enough new material coming out. If I was on tour, nationally or whatever, it's fresh to those people every night. But in Anchorage, everybody's kind of, not everybody, but a lot of folks already heard me. They hear the same songs, and I apologize about it. And I just haven't been putting enough time on it for a myriad of reasons. Partly lack of discipline on my part, or partly because I get pulled other directions or whatever. But I am fallible like anybody else. And so, to have a military style discipline would really benefit me quite well behind the scenes to kind of get it all together. So that's on me. You don't want to sit and go, well, these gigs suck or whatever. It's like, it is what you make it. And one of the things I battled in Anchorage after living in New York, where I was playing in venues that were like electric and you could feed off the audience, and it really just felt like a community. Here, you're playing to people and they don't know whether to clap. It's kind of awkward. They talk over you. They're not really there for you. You're just kind of wallpaper. They're there to catch up with their friends, or maybe they're there to try and get laid because they're lonely and it's a long winter. It's a lot of things. And the music is I get hired to kind of just be there to provide an atmosphere.
Yeah.
But sometimes I get hired to be featured, and those are the best gigs.
Hey, you might be responsible for making a lot of babies in Anchorage. Who knows? I've
had guys come up to me and be like, hey, man, I got laid last night. Thanks very much. I'm like, awesome. You're welcome.
And you're like, yeah, it took me 10 hours of work for the last, 4 or 5 days to prepare for this gig.
I mean, whatever, So, I would like to give better answers as far as inspiring people. But I think a more real look at it is that it is what you make of it. I think I was going to say that the way I kept myself motivated, even playing in, wallpaper gigs, as I call them, was I started doing what you're doing right now. We got this camera here that you're shooting footage, and I was doing secondary audio, and go home after a gig and stay up all night, trying to figure out how to sync the audio and the video, trying to find the best clip and put that up online. And wow, okay, the camera's never on the audience. I don't need people to see how few people are at my gigs, but they will have a look at what I'm doing in other states.
That's what I like about your stuff in general, is the content that you bring. And I want to know what Bill Hauser, KillBill, is the brand is providing. And that's why, I'm interested, and you keep putting out consistent content, and it's content that's interesting, and it has a storyline. So you tell us different things all the time, which that's how, I like to engage with it. And so it's the content that you're bringing, which to me, it was like, oh, he's got something to say. There's something interesting there.
I mean, I'm glad you feel that way. Yeah. I'm on autopilot half the time, to tell you the truth. A lot of songs I've been playing so long. But so, real quick plug, I got this gig coming up in a week from today, April 20th. I'll be at the Atwood Concert Hall at the PAC. I'm going to be opening for Peter White, who's a smooth jazz guitarist from the UK, and Josh Vietti, who's an up-and-coming hip-hop violinist. Both are really great. I'll be the first one up because they're way more famous than me. I'm the local guy. But to be on that stage, which is nothing like playing in Sullivan's or whatever, it's a whole different experience I don't normally get to have, versus them, and they tour and they get to have that experience all the time, where they play to large audiences, presumably, in people. It's always fresh and new. Everyone's like, oh, this is great. And then they're gone. They go to another city. I get to have a shot at it next Saturday. And, after this podcast is over, I'm going to go and practice and work on new material and hopefully have something ready for this new show. And I'll be wireless. I'll get to walk across the stage left and right, try to get the audience into it, versus my restaurant gigs where I stand in one place. And I'm like, okay, I hope I don't disturb anybody trying to talk.
Well, yeah. I'll get the podcast out as soon as possible, probably this afternoon.
It's all good. It's all good.
That way, yeah. And people should come experience that, right? Yeah, you are the local guy, but you're also representing us, right? And you're going to do this in a different venue, and you have more flexibility in terms of being stagnant or confined to one area, and you get to now be in this different arena with different musicians who are, I wonder what it's like for them in their hometown. They're probably the local guy that's opening up for other acts. So I'm not gonna sneeze at like you being this. I'm real hip on like Bill Hauser. I think that what you're doing is great, and so
thank you.
I want to point that out too. And then so I'll be there. I'll be there to support you.
Nice.
And
thank you.
Probably do some social media for it.
All right.
Do some if they let me, because you know how it is. I don't know. Sometimes they don't let you film that stuff.
Don't ask me, man. I'm not in charge.
But cool. We got about 10 minutes here, so I wanted to ask real quick. You mentioned that you needed to work on your own material.
Yeah.
And we've had this conversation before.
Yeah.
How's that going?
Slow. Everything is slow. I wear a lot of hats. I do have a part-time job too. I work from home, not to make excuses, which is what I'm doing. And I like to have a bit of a social life too. You know, one of the things I found is that being cooped up in your room all the time is what this entails. You know, you're practicing songs, you're working on your social media, you're working on your your next thing. You know, it's a lot of time spent in solitary, and you will lose your mind, especially when you're playing a lot of gigs where it just seems like people don't care. Apathy is a very difficult thing to have to battle. I feel like a lot of musicians, not just here, but in a lot of places, they don't feel inspired to practice because it just feels like, for what? What am I getting out of this? I'm getting money, or I'm being talked over, or what is it? It's not exactly a dream job to get hired someplace to just, be in the background. Most people aspire to bigger things, but in order to do that, you got to put the time in, and you've got to have the vision. Oops, sorry about that. I hit the microphone with my hand. And you got to visualize it and work towards it until it actually becomes a reality. And so that was a tangent, but getting back to answer your question, like, I am working with a producer right now from the UK, and I've got another friend who's a producer, and they're entirely different in terms of their approach and the type of music that they're accustomed to doing. And I did work on a music video a few weeks ago with the British producer guy. He's out of state at the moment. He'll be back to work with me on finishing like maybe four more songs. We'll try to put out like some sort of release of some kind. In today's market, it's less about albums. You think about in the 70s and the 80s, everybody had an LP, and they would open it up, and they would look at the side, the insides of it. Now it's about singles, and it's boom, it's over. And then when's the next single? Boom, it's over. So I feel like it's less important to put out one album than it is just to kind of keep people with content coming at them, and eventually it aggregates over into like, oh, he's got 4 or 5 songs out. So I got one song right now that I'm working on that's a cover. Actually, I'm going to do only covers to start, but they're going to be totally redone, re-instrumentalized, not using karaoke tracks like I'm doing on my gigs, but actually just I use live musicians and just get it done. And once that's done, I'll have something that I can start to tour with. Say, hey, come buy the CD or promote it or whatever, just to see what people are interested in. But the bottom line is that if you're starting out, covers is a really good way to go. Yeah,
so you're prototyping, you're at least some options for people that they can then access, and they can access you and have like a menu of things that they can listen to, on a streaming service or some other way they can access it.
Yeah, I think it's important. People, in order to take you seriously, they want to see some kind of something that you have, even if it's just covers. And as far as like it goes for me, like I'm comfortable with doing only covers because I'm not a songwriter. I have gotten asked, hey, can you put something on this? And it's original music, and I'll put horn parts on it. I'll record, from home, and I'll stack, these large horn lines, horns on horns sort of thing with harmonies. Or maybe I'll take a solo here and there, an ad-lib, that sort of thing. But that's about the extent of anything that I do that's original. Otherwise, it's just an original take on a song that people know. That's just where I'm at right now. It'll probably change at some point.
Yeah, I think your approach is right on, where you're starting with something that's familiar to people and getting them introduced to your sound and what you can do, and building a portfolio and a catalog over time. So then that way, 10 years, let's just be more optimistic. In 2 years from now, then they can listen to something and be like, oh yeah, Bob Mincer and Bill Hauser. And they can, flip through on Spotify or something and have your playlist going on.
We'll see. Yeah,
design something or something.
We'll see what happens, man. I kind of feel like I straddle the line between being patient and overly patient. Like, I'm not moving fast enough sometimes, I feel like. But at the same time, it's like, where is the line? Like, how fast are you supposed to move? Especially being up here in Anchorage, the only reach I have with other musicians that are on a national level is through social media. There's really not anybody else up here, and I'm not on that level either, that's doing anything nationally, because those people maybe they're on the road. Who knows what their deal is. But just because you move to a big market doesn't mean things are going to happen for you, as I have learned or other musicians have learned. So it's very much important to leverage the power of social media as much as possible, capture people's imagination. The fact that I'm a white guy from Anchorage, Alaska, playing all this old school R&B, soul, it stands out on its own from a marketing standpoint. So, it gets people curious. They want to know, who you are and what you're about. And I think most of my followers on Instagram are from not up here.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
A lot of folks from the South they're like, wow, what's this guy about? That sort of thing.
Yeah, there's a certain mystique to Alaska and us being so far away from the rest of the United States. So that's cool. I mean,
it's pretty random, I think, as far as they're concerned. Like, okay, that's weird.
You can be a headliner down there then.
I don't know how, but I don't really worry much about it. It's just I kind of take it week by week, month by month, and see what I need to get done, and then put it together. But you don't want to burn yourself out. It's a very easy thing to do with what I do, where I don't have a legal team, I don't have a promotional team, I got to do everything myself. So I try to.
You're a solopreneur. You do everything. Yeah.
What's got to happen next, and find a way to keep longevity going. So I'm not like, oh man, I can't. I'm just burnt, man. It's too much. You don't want to do that.
So in the last few minutes here, thinking about goals for the rest of the year.
Rest of the year, well, keep booking gigs, keep bringing money in as much as possible. Get these tracks done with the producer I'm working with from the UK, and get this music video out that we shot on one of the songs. And I think once those tracks are done, then I will start looking at, what's the best marketing plan for those. How am I going to release this? A lot of people, they can't wait. They've worked so hard on a song. They've been in the studio, go. And then they're like, okay, everybody, world premiere. And the world premiere is Facebook. You've got to have something more behind it than that. And maybe you're like, well, what do you want from me? I'm just a musician. I'm not a marketing PR person. It's like, that's cool. But if you're going to work that hard on something, you might as well work that hard on the
communications plan,
on the promoting of it, the marketing. Can you get some money behind it? Can you do a GoFundMe? Can you get somebody to invest in you as a sponsorship? I don't know much about that world. I seem to stay busy with these local gigs, and then everything else I got going on in life. That it's like it's a juggling act, and somebody's probably going to light a fire under my ass. Who's listening to this, friends, like, hey man, you're being too laid back about this. You need to really go. And, I'll do what I can. But I think it's important to rely on others as little as possible, because everybody, especially in this line of work, there's a lot of people out there that they're just trying to get on and get over on you. They're trying to get a buck. It's nothing personal, but they're struggling, and that's just the way it is. So the more that you can do for yourself, I feel like the better.
Self-reliance.
As much as you can.
Cool, man. I appreciate having you on, man. I'm really looking forward to your upcoming performance that you have. And how long is it? One more time?
That's April 20th at the PAC. Showtime's at 8. I'll be the first one up. I think I'm doing like 20, 30 minutes. Atwood Concert Hall. And if you guys are interested in tickets, just feel free to DM me at KillBill Sax, and I can direct you to where you can get tickets.
All right, Bill. It's been a pleasure having you on. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you so much.